Mass tourism in some parts of Europe has led to protests on the streets and anger at foreign visitors as locals push back. Some cities are drawing up plans to combat rising tourist numbers. But are they going far enough to combat the impact of mass tourism, and how can it become more sustainable? Hello and welcome to Roundtable. I'm Enda Brady. Now, European residents fed up with mass tourism have been demanding it to end. And now some authorities are taking action. The French Riviera city of Cannes is restricting cruise ship traffic from 2026. And the Greek islands of Santorini and Mykonos are introducing a new tourist tax for cruise passengers. But will these measures work? And can tourist numbers in certain hotspots really be limited?
In parts of Spain, Italy and Portugal, local residents are frustrated and pushing back against mass tourism. In Barcelona, water pistols were used on holiday makers, with some protesters targeting hotels with smoke bombs. Their anger is clear, with thousands taking part in a recent demonstration.
I think that right now mass tourism brings poverty because the wages we're paid are not enough for us to live. A big chunk of prices, both of rent and consumption in general here in Barcelona, are determined by tourist demand rather than people's economic possibilities.
I think in Barcelona and many other cities in the Mediterranean area, there's a necessity to change monoculture of tourism, because it's obviously very easy to make money out of tourism, but it has a strong impact on the local population.
In 2024, Europe welcomed almost 747 million travelers. And while tourism boosts local economies, it's also driving up housing prices, overwhelming infrastructure, and damaging ecosystems. This summer, the Greek islands of Santorini and Mykonos have introduced a cruise passenger tax to reduce the overwhelming number of visitors during peak season, while the French Riviera city of Cannes is putting limits on cruises. Starting from 2006, ships carrying more than 1,000 passengers will be banned from docking in the port. But what other measures can be implemented to help tourism become sustainable? And are local authorities willing to make a change?
Well, let's meet our guests. Joining us from Tenerife, we have Sharon Backhouse. Sharon is director of Geo Tenerife, a British and Canarian science, travel and research company. In Machynlleth in Wales, we have Tom Jenkins. He is CEO of the European Tourism Association. And I'm delighted to say here with me in the studio, we have the travel journalist Simon Calder. You're all very welcome to Roundtable. Simon, to you, first of all, they really don't like these big cruise ships, do they?
Well, it all depends who they are, but in general, if you can see a vessel heading your direction with 3, 4, 5,000 passengers on board, you know they are going to be getting off. They're going to be, of course, spending a bit of money in your shops and restaurants maybe, but they're also going to be taking on excursions where the cruise company is earning quite a lot of profit from that. And they're not going to be staying overnight and eating and everything. They're just going to be crowding out your streets, making it very difficult for a normal life to continue, and actually quite difficult for the kind of tourists that lots of locations want, people who stay longer, spend money in the local community. So, yeah, if you've got these ships, and clearly you can have more than one coming along in a day, then you are going to be very concerned about it as a local.
So these cruise ships, they're pretty much the living embodiment of over-tourism, aren't they? You can see them. It's like a small football stadium emptying out.
Oh, of course it is, yes. I mean, it's an extraordinary phenomenon. However, first of all, an awful lot of people like them. We have seen the constant growth, apart from COVID, in cruising. They deliver what a lot of people want from a holiday, which is to be able to visit loads of places, but without the actual hassle of travelling from one place to another. So very strong demand for them. And of course, the cruise company is very happy to meet that demand. And there's still an awful lot of places which are going to be saying, of course, we want to have a cruise ship in here. It's not as great as other forms of inbound tourism, but we'll still take it because we need all the help we can get. But if you go to somewhere like Dubrovnik in Croatia and you've got 2 cruise ships in a day, if you're an independent traveller, you'll just be walking in the opposite direction.
Let's bring in Sharon in Tenerife. Sharon, what are you seeing in the Canary Islands then? Because those islands depend heavily on tourism, but a lot of locals in Tenerife, I guess, have had enough at times.
You know, it's a really tricky situation we're going through right now, and thank you so much for inviting me on the programme. We've had record numbers of tourists and tourism here in the last year, over 18 million. We're going to beat that record this year again. And the problem is that all that generation of wealth is not trickling down to the local population. The Canary Islands have this extraordinary investment regime where investors pay very little tax and then have free repatriation of profits. So we have mega hotels, we have cruise ships, we have all of these operators coming to these islands, using up really limited resources, offering very poorly paid jobs often. We're seeing an increase in the last 12 months, a really worrying increase of local people having to live in caravans, in tents, because they can't afford a place to live on the salaries they're earning. And despite this galloping tourism model that generates profits of over 22 billion euros, it only leaves about 2 billion euros in terms of tax. And alongside that comes poor jobs, water shortages, infrastructure collapse, a use of resources where, you know, we see swimming pools that are full to the brim and tourists having a lovely time, which is great, but locals having water shortages, problems with housing. So we've seen massive demonstrations in the last year, not because in any way, shape or form locals are against tourists. They're very aware that there was an area of poverty not so long ago, a few decades ago. There was real issues with lack of income. So tourism is important, but what we're talking about is trying to implement a model that is more sustainable. And of course, as we all know, sustainable tourism isn't just saving a bit of water and recycling your rubbish. It's actually putting the needs and the wants of locals right at the centre of all your planning. And that's what we're trying to encourage with all the work that we do. Look at different ways of listening, of planning, of opening up for locals to be able to really benefit from this rampant tourism regime, which at the moment is just making a very small handful of very powerful investors exceedingly rich, but it's not trickling down, and that can't be right.
Thanks, Sharon. Tom, to you, that is a very good, well-argued point, isn't it? The golden goose needs to be looked after at all levels.
Well, for some people, it's clearly not a golden goose, but the structures you're having to cope with in Tenerife are a byproduct of decisions made in Tenerife, which is to allow a very liberal tax regime and a very liberal repatriation of money regime. I think it's very similar to the situation in Dubrovnik, and indeed, any of the cities where you see these large cruise ships arrive, they arrive because someone sold them the right to arrive. They bought that right, and that community or someone in that community has wanted to see the money arriving from it. So it's not just the spend of the individual tourists when it comes to cruise ships. It's the local council making a decision that they want to sell the birthrights to those vehicles. So I think a lot of the problems we're facing are to do with tourism, but they're to do with the way in which local authorities and local councils handle that tourism. And it's very strange that you almost blame the visitors for the decisions which have been made locally.
So, Tom, you think politically or at a business level, someone in these places is actively going after these tourists, and then it's left to the local population to kind of pick up the problems?
Well, it's not. It's up to the local population to create a legislative environment where these matters can be handled. I don't question that there is a problem in Dubrovnik. Don't question that there were at times problems in Venice from cruise lines arriving. But it's really up to the local council to decide which boats they wish to arrive and what effectively they're allowed to do. Now, Simon raised the very valid point that these companies are running excursions where most of the money is being kept on board. But again, it's really up to, I think there's probably more up to a European solution to look at how you rake money back off these things. But I think nearly all circumstances that I'm looking at where over-tourism, really two forms of over-tourism, either overcrowding, which is what you were alluding to earlier, or the problems associated with behemoth resorts, which very much are enclosed units where it's very difficult for people to spend outside those areas. These have been allowed to take place. These are byproducts of permits being issued locally.
Thank you, Tom. Simon, to you, I noticed a couple of Greek islands have just recently started charging people from cruise liners going ashore. So Mykonos and Santorini, two of the most famous Greek islands, will now charge you €20 if you land for the day off a cruise ship. That's not going to stop anyone, is it?
Well, it might stop a few around the edges because MSC, for instance, one of the big cruise lines, has said to people, OK, this is now an extra charge. We're not going to absorb it. You can stay on the ship and just look at beautiful Santorini and you won't pay it. But otherwise, if you do want to get off, you're going to be paying this. I think most people will get off. But this, I think, speaks to what Tom is saying, which is that it is absolutely incumbent on every community to come up with its own way of running things. Personally, I think, having been in Santorini on a day when a cruise ship or three turns up, I'd say make it €50. And plan it so that it's not just €50 every day. And I think the Greeks are doing this. The price comes down in October, for instance, when it's off peak, when you're not going to have the same crowding problems. And wherever you are, and let's go back to Tenerife, you have the levers of controlling the amount of tourism you want. Yes, it can get out of control. It can get out of balance. And in Amsterdam, we've seen the local council voted in to do something about the imbalance where you've got particularly young groups, I'm afraid, of British men and women coming in and drinking and behaving badly. That makes it trashes the city, and they want that to come to a stop. And they're also ramping up the taxes on hotels, which again has the right thing. One more point, Airbnb and similar platforms. If you go to Dubrovnik, I went into one short street of about 20 houses. I think there were two which had actual people living there. The rest were all just apartments
Airbnb.
for rent. And again, a community can take that view. Yeah, we're just going to put the entire old town on the market, but it's going to have consequences.
And tell me, Simon, you mentioned Santorini earlier on. What's it like when 2 and 3 cruise ships just pile in on the same day?
Well, and again, you can, as a tourist, make your own arrangements so that Santorini, it's not a huge island, but most people will tend to go to similar places. They'll go to the beautiful town at the north and have a good look at what happens there. It's very, very pretty. They will go all the way through the streets of the main town, Thera. They'll have a look at the sunset, and then they will get back onto their ships. And if you actually go and explore the rest of the island, some beautiful beaches, lovely coast, some really genuine Greek tavernas where you can get a decent lunch. You can go and do those things. But frankly, I would be delighted to return to Santorini as I did once in December, when over-tourism is a distant memory. And like most parts of the world, most parts of Europe, you've got serious under-tourism. A lot of places would love to have a problem like over-tourism.
Sharon, back to you. Do you think we need to be looking at more taxes on tourism, or is it, as Tom said, better local leadership? What do you think the solutions are?
I think thank you for the question. It's absolutely critical to be talking about this because the context of the Canary Islands is quite complex. And I think we have been doing a disservice to the locals here in the Canary Islands who've been trying to speak out. We've seen a lot of really quite obnoxious headlines in some newspapers, which is why I'm really grateful for the time that Roundtable is taking to look at this issue in the round, trying to mark this out as a demonstration against tourists. What's actually happening in the Canary Islands is that we have some really powerful foreign investors putting very heavy pressure on the local authorities and some really irregular things going on. And locals have been sort of really trying to stand up and have their voices heard, and they're either being gaslit by the authorities, being said, oh yes, we're doing exactly what you're asking and not doing anything at all or doing something completely different. The foreign press is saying, oh my goodness, if they don't want our tourism, we'll go somewhere else. They do need tourism, they appreciate tourism, but they just want a different model of tourism. And at the moment, they're stuck between a rock and a hard place. The authorities are afraid that if they go too far, they'll upset the investors who are here, who constantly threaten to take their business elsewhere. We saw that recently with one of the airlines. What we're trying to do is to call out what sustainable tourism actually means, because we have really headline investors here with massive hotels selling themselves as green, while at the same time destroying all these wonderful landscapes and alienating locals from the places that they love. And Simon raises a really important point about Airbnb, but it's quite a complex issue because on the one hand, you might have a local who inherited a small flat and they earn a bit of extra income by renting out their property. And I think that's fair via Airbnb. I've used Airbnb. I like to stay in somebody's home. But what we're seeing in the Canary Islands is investment funds who are buying up 100 properties at a time, swallowing them up into this Airbnb model, making huge amounts of money and taking that property out of the market. We're now seeing a really serious problem coming out off the back of that. Some hotel chains are deciding that the answer to this problem is to build housing for their workers. On the surface, that might sound great, but can you imagine having a job in a hotel which is low paid, precarious, your housing, your family house, the area where your children is growing up is dependent on that job and the mercurial decisions that your line manager may take. I think this is a really worrying development and one we're following so closely because we are concerned.
Thank you, Sharon. Tom, you work at the highest level in the tourism industry. How much concern are you picking up then about over-tourism this year?
I think I go back to what Simon was saying earlier. Over-tourism only occurs in about 2% of the destinations in Europe, and it occurs in those 2% of the destinations about 10% of the time. I mean, we're not dealing with European-wide a major problem. It is a major problem in one or two, maybe 10, maybe 20 places in Europe. Is it a major concern? I think it is a concern insofar as it's a story. I think that in general the industry wants to deliver what clients want, and if clients want to go to places which are already popular, and it's not surprising that these places are crowded if they're popular, they will do their best to facilitate that. Unfortunately, but that's the way in which the market works. The one thing I would plead with people is that, the good thing about group tourism, and I suppose on one level, cruise tourism is one form of group tourism, albeit very large, is that these things are dirigible. I mean, you can actually tell people that you can't come or you should go into another area. And I think you're going to start finding people going more and more to less populated, less popular, less exploited, if you like, destinations. You're going to start seeing that. You're definitely going to start seeing an increase in low season travel being promoted, because this is the point at which the intermediaries, who I largely represent, actually add value. They don't actually add much value bringing people in a high season into Dubrovnik or to Venice or to Rome. They add value by doing so in low season when the demand is necessary. So you are going to see a shift in that direction.
Thank you, Tom. Simon, to you, talk to me about the rise of the influencers. and social media and
Yes.
how much blame must be attached to these people who find a secret beach and then go on Instagram to tell the world about it.
It is, you've explained that very well. So there are all kinds of locations where, thanks to partly influencers, people just promoting places themselves on social media, but also due to great cult series such as Game of Thrones, there will be places which are just absolutely thronging with people, and it completely destroys what it is that you want to go and see. But while I'm not saying in any sense that's fine, people need to take a bit of responsibility. I was glad to hear Tom referring to his tour operators actually saying to people, no, we're going to take you to off the beaten track Italy in summer, because frankly, you do not want to be in Rome, in Florence, in Venice on a hot day in August. We're going to take you to some, I was going to say equally wonderful places. The Rome, Venice and Florence are special for many reasons, but we're going to give you a much better experience. And once you've been to Rome on a day when it's 40 plus, you're never going to go there again unless it's November and the tourists have gone home. So I think if we take responsibility as tourists, we'll be able to tell, if a place is just unbearably touristy, we don't want to be part of that. We are part of the problem, so let's clear off.
I love discovering new places. I mean, I see social media, I see these influencers.
Yeah.
They make me want to go somewhere else.
Yeah, but let's say some of them will make you want to go to this hidden beach in Albania. And actually, that's quite durable because it's not the easiest place in the world to get to, Albania. And therefore, if you get there, if you find your way down the Adriatic coast to this secret beach, you'll find another couple of dozen people who've made the same journey as you. But you are going to get there. It's places which are more accessible, where I think the influence have the biggest impact. I won't say the most damage.
Thanks, Simon. Sharon, to you, give me your thoughts on influencers then in the tourism world.
Look, we've all seen these amazing pictures and we've all thought, gosh, I'd like to be there and have a photograph. And I think that's natural. But I do think that we're demonizing the wrong people. I think visitors have a natural curiosity and a love for places, and that's great, but they don't always have the best possible information available. And I know that I keep harping on about this point, but I think we do need to take everyone involved to task on this. So we had something recently happen here in Tenerife, which I'd very much appreciate Simon's views on. We had a demonstration outside an operator's hotel who is currently building another hotel called Cuna del Alma, which demonstrators are desperately trying to stop because it's in this area of incredible beauty with very high natural values, very much loved by the locals. So they went outside one of his other hotels to say, look, you who are staying here, you should know this is what the operator is doing just 2 or 3 kilometers down the road. They're selling you this is as absolute paradise and sustainable, but this is what they're doing down the road. And what's more, this new project, they're saying it has an eco manifesto, it's sensitive, it's ecologically sound, and nothing could be further from the truth, quite honestly. There was somebody staying at that hotel who heard what was going on, who read the flyers that they were handing out and put something on TripAdvisor. To say, oh my gosh, I'm horrified to hear this is how this operator works. I'm never going to be booking with them again, and I don't advise anybody else to do so. And then something really curious happened. Lots of locals went on TripAdvisor and put 1-star reviews, but no, they're not actual guests. So all of those were removed. But this guest review was removed, and I have a real problem with that, because I think local visitors to these destinations have the right and are interested to have this information and want to make an informed information. And I don't think we do enough to call out resorts and operators who sell you the green dream while actually not living up to that expectation. Some of these sustainable logos are actually quite easy to get and don't drill far down enough into what they actually do. And I think we have to take that to task. So
Sharon, let's bring Simon back in.
Locals and tourists, yeah.
Simon, your thoughts on that?
Okay, so absolutely take Sharon's points, but a couple of things. First of all, I'm a guest in a hotel in Tenerife. I think I'm one of the good guys because hotels are made for foreign tourists as opposed to apartments in cities. So I've done, I think, the right thing. I've also been working my socks off in Stockholm or Warsaw or Berlin, and I just want to have a nice holiday, thank you. if you've got problems here with the development down the road, I'm sorry to hear that, but that's kind of your problem. You elect the politicians who have the officials who give permission for these things. And in terms of any online review platform, if it is not giving honest answers or not presenting a full range of views, then it will gradually wane, because people will think, well, that's a load of old rubbish. Yeah. So I'd say, again, it's a problem that needs to be sorted out by the community.
Tom, sustainability, we hear this as a buzzword in tourism, but it seems to be increasingly difficult to actually make it happen in certain areas.
Well, there are different sustainabilities. I mean, as was Sharon quite rightly raised, do you want to have it sustainable from the point of view of the society you're visiting? Do you want it sustainable from the point of view of the ecology of the area that you're visiting? Do you want it sustainable from the point of view of greenhouse gas emissions? There are several varieties of sustainability. But one thing is for certain is that it's something that's been taken very seriously by the industry. A lot of people are paying a lot more than lip service to it. And yet, at the moment, it's the customers who need to lead, and the customers are not that concerned about it. When they become concerned, then it will become top priority for the industry. At the moment, it's a priority for the industry, but it's top down. It's being led by companies, and the customers are not necessarily buying along green lines. We're waiting for that to happen.
Thank you, Tom. The clock is beaten. There's Sharon in Tenerife as well, and Simon Calder here in the studio with me. Remember, you can see more discussion and debate on our YouTube channel. Just search for Roundtable, TRT World. But for now, from me, Enda Brady, and all the team here, goodbye, and thank you for watching.